Okay. A Scanner Darkly is a 1977 novel by Philip K. Dick, obviously. It is one of his more semi-autobiographical ones, meaning that draws from his real life kind of experience in the counterculture of drugs in the 70s. I don't know if he mentioned, I think he did put a kind of author's forward somewhere in the book, and he talks about how that certain figures like Tim O'Leary are coming up and showing that drugs weren't as kind of dangerous, and like especially psychedelic drugs of that kind of there were more like they could be used as like helpful guides of self-discovery and like kind of gaining intuitive insights. And he talks about how he kind of spiraled out of control with his own Dick in this talked about how that kind of went overboard, and that he kind of that spawned the ideas that he had of I'm not sure to what degree this kind of had his religious, although he wasn't anything of a dogma. He was more of slightly kind of almost Gnostical in that sense of kind of combining a little bit of the Episcopalian. I'm not sure if it was egalitarian or one of the churches, or if it was Episcopalian. But he kind of clung to that later in life, at least until his death of shortly. He didn't live. He tragically died at the age of 53, I believe, his early 50s. And yeah, I don't know how much of that was the drugs or how much of that I think there was also, it might have been a cancer that kind of arose. I don't know too much on the details, which is weird because I'm a pretty big fan of his, but I've regrettably not have gone through even not even synchronicity yet. Well, not synchronicity, but the simulacrum. Sorry, I did kind of. I'm getting kind of a little bit confused because I was like talking about synchronicity earlier. But yeah, so Philip K. Dick talks about in this book, draws his own kind of experiences of doubt and being thrown into kind of a whirlwind of an addiction, and then all these. Then he kind of combines them together with the characters of Bob Arctor and Donna Hawthorne, and then Charles Freck and Chuck Barris, or wait, or was that Chuck? Was it Chuck Barris? I think it was Chuck Barris. I might be mixing that up because that does sound like a kind of jazz name, but it was something Barris. But yeah, so in the movie, obviously that was a Richard Linklater film, which is one of my favorite Linklaters. It's hard to choose, but that's definitely on the kind of the top tier of my favorite. It's probably a tie with Waking Life and the Before trilogy as a whole. As a whole, is my. But yeah, so I obviously came into this watching the movie first a while back, and yeah, I love how the kind of rotoscoped adaptation that the what's the word, the totally blanking on the word. It's somebody's interpretation of the movie, I thought, or the story, and it follows. Yeah, so Bob Octor is the main character pretty much, and they're all in a house full of fellow drug users who use this thing. It's a very it's 20 years in the future roughly. So it's set in the late 90s, I think 96 or something, like in the mid to late 90s. So where there's basically this drug. It's very powerful and hypnotic. Some of it has kind of an opiate kind of quality of alleviating, taking pain away, which is very simple, and others use it because it's got like this great almost catch-all, like cure-all kind of panacea everything to it. Like it has the quality of drawing people in and making them not like care about anything else, not take care of themselves, and kind of just slide through life in these houses. They just stay together, and a little bit almost like kind of remind me of Train Stoppers, or sorry, not Train Stoppers, Train Spotting. Wow, I am this anyway. But yeah, yeah, I should have ate before this because I'm starving now. But I was trying to squeeze a lot of these things in, so it's because I know I'm not gonna get to it later on in the day. But anyway, so keep that in mind. Yeah, but Trainspotting kind of had a similar atmosphere of these drug users who are kind of stuck in a cycle, and it's like, but at the same time they're trying to get out of this societal wheel, like a hamster wheel. I don't have anything new to say about this, but basically, you know, like how much does that kind of play into it in A Scanner Darkly is basically how all the characters are kind of trying to escape from how much, it's kind of a thing of like how much of the main question that I love about, and this is what I love, because it's like it's not so much the science fiction aspect with the scrambled suit that's like able to kind of like cover someone's identity and make them kind of appear, make these police officers appear as non-threatening people, as like kind of going into, it's a little bit convoluted. I convoluted it probably on purpose, but I think some of the critics were a little bit like that Philip K. Dick didn't explain it clearly enough, and that he was like kind of, part of him was like a little bit too dwelling on the one aspect of the relationships, like Donna Hawthorne and the love that Bob Octor that has for her, and is trying to kind of win over, and that she never quite actually reciprocates that love, and so that's kind of that, you know, the main driving force. And then, but this other part of the felt a little bit like a little bit needed to be fleshed out, like it was a little bit underdeveloped or needed a little bit more whittling down, which is a sci-fi kind of the particular details of that, the exposition. You know, sometimes we get a little bit heavy with that kind of aspect of like, this is what's going on with you know, this world now, which is obviously it's the dystopia, and obviously nobody does that like he does. And I think Valis, as far as which is probably my favorite, even more so than Julie Andrews' Dream of Electric Sheep, because I felt like that was a little bit harder to get to identify with the main characters of that, you know, like of that, you know, Deckard in that, and John Deckard, I felt was a little bit of a one color, one note, I guess. But he was meant to be. I totally understand that it was meant to be. I mean, but I did love Valis because the characters in that, despite having almost like a kind of similar setup to A Scanner Darkly, with all these kind of oddball people, kind of, you know, conspiratorial, in the whole science fiction kind of like meta kind of like this movie kind of this the idea of like this perfect movie kind of infinite jest kind of almost like I also thought was really driving you into the narrative, and it didn't feel like work reading it, whereas this felt like a little bit more work just because of the loose ends. It felt like there was a little bit too many loose ends, but that's just me, or that's what some of the critics were getting at. I'm not sure how much I agree with that, but I other than that, I did find the entire book to be very like to have a good healthy mix of kind of like in a kind of a search, and a very human search for truth and understanding, and this I keep stuttering that out, I don't know why, but there's this I guess like a very human kind of search, and the main kind of question of it, the like is the fact that they're searching for something very, is the like I can't talk at all, man. There is like some yearning for like, is the drugs that they're using, is that actually helping them escape from the reality, or should they just face reality? Should they just face it as it is, and like with all the woes and all the terrors of it, or should they just completely like, or is that worth it, or is the world so dystopian and so awful, which is pretty, I think, a pretty very strong, like, oof, the cutting kind of incisive, like to the heart, like what I love about Philip K. Dick and what I love about this book, the overall kind of Platonic narrative idea of it. So yeah, so Bob Octor is like, there's this thing called the New Life, which is rehab, you know, it's a very kind of thinly veiled rehabilitation that they send them to go pick, they go on this farm, and they kind of like, it's like this like very kind of like happy, it's very kind of like this like dissociatively, where fake forced happy, like they're trying to make them like do all this work that's like meaningful and like gets them out of their head and gets them away and weans them off this drug, but all of the work is like very just like menial, like picking. I want to say it's like kind of migrant worker kind of like stuff. Like it's like meaningless labor. I think so. They all want to kind of avoid that because they all know what that is, and so I think Donna eventually makes or convinces Bob to go there, and so it's kind of like all this is going on at once, and they're all trying to kind of avoid the get more of their drugs and trying to avoid it, and then they all fall out of it, and they kind of it's like an in and out again. So it's like a kind of thing where the love I think is like a weird thing where Donna only really loves Bob when she's kind of under the when she's like kind of under the influence of these drugs. So it's like very kind of like it's this thing where it's like sure when he faces reality's dim and all this stuff, but like at the same time when they're all using together, they all feel like this closest than they've ever felt before. So it's like a weird kind of double-edged sword of addiction that I think Philip Dick captures very well. And that is all I have for A Scanner Darkly. And definitely recommend it. Check it out, and thanks for watching. Thank you for bearing with my very inarticulate ramblings, and I'll see you in the next one.